Please be seated. So I'm going to talk today a little bit about signs and symbols. And I'm going to use these terms in a special way. Like we think of a sign or a symbol and maybe a literary allusion, but theologically, a symbol is actually something very different. So just as an example, let's think about this. If somebody sent you an email that said, "I love you," that's one thing. But if somebody comes up to you, hugs you, kisses you, and says, "I love you," those are two different expressions of love, right? And so the sign is the email. It's a written record. That's it. The symbol is the present reality that gives substance to something invisible. So theologically, a symbol is something that is present to you, giving proof of what that thing is. So the reason I mention this is that in the Transfiguration, Christ demonstrated that he was the symbol of God's love, the really present reality of God being present to us here in a physical body. And this moment is super important. I mean, all the synoptic gospels have it. Peter, the letter that was just read, references this same moment. So clearly, this thing happened. It really mattered. This symbol of Christ being more than just a human being, more than just being a good rabbi, was important to our understanding of who we are to God. So this is really where human nature meets the godhood and demonstrates that Jesus is the bridge between heaven and earth. In Greek Orthodoxy, this moment is called the metamorphosis. So it's kind of like the butterfly coming out, right? And so this moment of transfiguration reminded me of how Christ transformed for me over the years. Is this echoing or is this okay? It is echoing. What should I do with it? Any ideas? I'll try it up here. Is that better? A little better? Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so for me, this showed how Christ transformed over the years. So when I started my Christian journey, I was raised in a household in which this book here, the Bible, was the end-all and be-all of the Christian experience. You knew this book inside and out. We read the book cover to cover every year, all the way through. I grew up with the King James. I grew up with this kind of fundamentalist evangelical perspective on, the Bible being what Christianity was about, full stop. And you'll notice that we do other things here than just read the Bible in the Episcopal Church. And so I found that really interesting when I first started my journey in my 20s as a Christian in the Episcopal Church, because I chose this. And I want to talk about the differences, because the world that I was raised in was that kind of evangelical fundamentalist world, and there are two characteristics that are super important there. One is that it's kind of a Gnostic world. The spirit and the body are separate things. The spirit is holy, going to heaven. The body is profane, does things wrong. There's all sorts of apprehensions about the body. If you're gay, if you get tattoos, if you have other things happening with your body, then clearly you're not holy, right? So the body and spirit are super separated in that type of Christianity. And also, the intellectual understanding of who Jesus is preeminent. If you accept Jesus, you're good. End of story. You don't even have to come to church. You don't have to do anything except intellectually conceive of what God is about And so there's all these intellectual arguments about the Bible and the Greek meanings of words and the Hebrew meaning of word, right? But those discussions are really what Christianity is about over there. So the difference here is that it's not necessarily just about what's happening in your head. Because God actually didn't come to us as a disembodied brain. God came to us in a human body. And Christ came to us as a living symbol of love. An embodied, fully present symbol of God's love. The human body is actually holy before God. And a lot of the Christian practices that speak to this longer tradition pre-existed the Bible. So let's talk about what some of those were. These traditions, these ways of understanding the symbols of God's love were there well before it was all written down. So let's close our eyes for a second. Just close your eyes for a second. You can look at this candle as you close your eyes, right? And imagine that you're holding a candle. And that candle was lit by a previous candle. And that candle was lit by the one before it, stretching back past the birth of the internet, back past the Stonewall riots, back past the Civil Rights era. The candles lighting their way back in time, past the creation of the first automobile, past World War II, World War I, back into the Victorian era, back before Europeans came to this continent, back into the Renaissance, back into the Middle Ages, the Byzantine period, candles lighting each other all the way back into the Mediterranean, into a set of little gatherings where people lit candles to remember their Savior, their transfigured Lord who had come to them so powerfully. Perhaps one or two people in those gatherings had lit a candle from a taper held by Mary Magdalene when she discovered the tomb empty the previous weekend. What a present reality of Christ to us. These candles, a symbol over the centuries of God being present with us. You can open your eyes now. But imagine these candles that we light are part of that long tradition. And we know that this tradition pre-existed the writing down of the Bible because it's mentioned in Acts. That the Christians, the believers gathered together with candles. So they were gathering before that letter was even written. They were gathering with candles. And that's part of the reason we light the Paschal candle, because that's a symbol of the eternal flame of the Christian experience that has come to us through the centuries. And there's so many more symbols here. I mean, I love going to this church because I feel enveloped in symbols that are communicating to me love. For example, small one, you come in the red door of the Episcopal Church. Have you ever noticed that? Most Episcopal churches have red doors. That goes back centuries. And there are several reasons, but a red door in the Middle Ages meant sanctuary. You are safe here. You will not be treated with violence or contempt. You will find justice and peace. Sanctuary. And the red doors also symbolize the blood of Christ and the blood of Passover that represents the angel of death standing aside from this house. Today, we still paint our doors red to symbolize we are a haven for emotional and spiritual healing and a place for forgiveness, redemption, reconciliation. So after you come in the door, then you pass the baptismal font, right? And some people, you might just walk right past it and not even recognize it's there. But that baptismal font is there in nearly every church for a really important reason. It is there as a symbol of new life. And if you count the sides, there are 8 sides. That symbolizes the 8th day of creation, the octagon. It's the day of resurrection. And it marks you as baptized as you pass by it. It's saying, here you are, renewed, washed. And the symbol of it is that there's a vast waterfall coming down as you walk in, and you pass through that waterfall to get in here. And that waterfall is washing off all of the pain and dirt that you bear so that you can be here fully present. And that water, that symbol of new life and cleansing, it's renewing your baptism every week. And also in this church, everybody who comes through that door is welcome. Everybody is part of that baptismal covenant. It's not you have to believe these things, you have to accept Jesus in this way, you have to understand this Greek word that way. It doesn't matter. We're here because we are together under that baptismal covenant of grace and that present symbol. That's why when you walk by, you can touch the water to renew your baptism. You can remind yourself that holiness is with you, that God loves you. That's why the baptismal font is there as a gushing fountain, as we sang in the hymn, of God's love. So that's a symbol, just as Christ was up on that mountain. That baptismal font is a symbol for us of God saying, I love you, I'm washing you, I care about you. And the theological welcome that extends is, again, for everyone. We'll hear it when we do communion, that all are welcome at the table. And then, why do we bow when we enter a pew? Like, we come up here and a lot of people bow, right? And there are a couple different things for that, but this also is a symbol. What we're doing with our bodies is this awesome symbol of an official meeting. The actual technical term is hypopante, of heart, soul, and mind and body to be with God. It's like Moses taking off his sandals in the presence of the holy. So for me, one thing I try to do is I try to turn off my phone so I can be with God, right? So I can really be fully present, leave behind the trivial, enter the holy. And for me, I also bow because this thing is a mystery. It's like quantum entanglement. It's a great mystery I don't fully understand. So I bow my head in wonder and joy at this presence of this mystery, which can't be untangled for me. And there's also this other cool thing. You notice we're in pews, right? We aren't in little stadium seats. And I read something recently. Pews are like a boat. Have you ever rowed in a dragon boat or another rowing group together? You're actually there, not in a stadium seat, not here for entertainment, but we're in a pew with people. We're all going to row together towards grace. As the poet Anne Sexton said, we're all rowing towards God. And we're doing it together. It's work. We all say these things together. It's not entertainment. I'm sorry, but I'm not a rock band. I'm not a comedian. It's work. We're all doing this holy work together, which brings me to another thing. Why all this standing and sitting and kneeling and all of that, right? Why do we do that? It's this wonderful liturgical dance. It's a super slow dance, but it's a liturgical dance. You're very slowly dancing before God in joy and wonder. And once you know the movements and the steps, you can participate in the dance, regardless of what's being preached or read or sung. It's a dance of liturgy. So why are we dancing? Why use our bodies at all? Why our bodies? Well, it goes back to what I said at the beginning. Remember the kind of fundamentalist view of it's all up here, it's a headspace? In this church, it's not a headspace. Our bodies are fully welcome here. Our queer bodies, our trans bodies, our heteronormative bodies, your bodies are a holy part of God's kingdom. And people have taken this understanding over the years and twisted it. But really, your body is God's holy temple that she formed out of love. And so God is showing how your body is holy with every breath that you take, with every beat of your heart, with every movement. And we honor that holiness when we use our body in worship. We aren't just our minds to God. It's not a head game. Our physical actions are a holy experience. That liturgical dance is a way of participating in the holy, of becoming that symbol of God's love. I know this is kind of weird stuff, but it's all there in the theology. It's so much fun because if you look at the New Testament too, Paul uses this word, this Greek word, that he actually unites the body and soul in the words he uses. He's not using that Gnostic words. I mean, the Greeks invented Gnosticism. So he could have used a word that meant the soul so totally separated from the body. He doesn't. He uses a word that unites them. That's also why in Christian theology you have things like the resurrection of the body and the holiness of the body, because our bodily experience matters to God. What you're going through with your body, if you're sick, if you're well, if you're going through a transition, if you're everything that you experience in your body, your emotions, those are part of your holy experience. They're part of your spiritual experience. We are body and soul as one being before God. So that's part of why we bow when we come to the table of Christ or when the cross and the book pass by. But there are some other reasons why we bow too. Theologically, God is probably outside of time and space. So that means that Christ on this table is always being sacrificed. We're at the presence of the cross. Not a cross, the cross. And this crucifixion moment, we're right there with the living symbol of Christ. Christ is right here with us now. Wouldn't you bow in awe and wonder at the presence of Christ? This is not an empty sign. It's not a book. It's a present reality. And that's also why we cross ourselves. We're reminding ourselves we are marked with the sacrifice of Christ, and we are tattooed with his love. We are bearing silent witness to this ultimate love. We are remarking ourselves as Christ's own forever. We're proclaiming that we are loved and we are symbols of love to others. So you might already have come to this conclusion. There's a reason why we do communion. It was done before the Bible was written down. The Bible was probably compiled in about the 400s, and the communion table and the Nicene Creed started being compiled in the 300s. So this experience of communion together is a Christian experience that has traveled through thousands of years, even while there were arguments over exactly what was in the Bible, even as there were arguments about other things. The communion experience has been a consistent thing, just like that candle that you imagined. The communion table is that experience of Christian fellowship together that has been consistent in our worship forever. The present reality, communicating the invisible. So a couple other things might be of interest. We read the gospel from the middle of the congregation, don't we? And Tracy comes down, walks all the way out there, and just as she's going to do now, right? Sure. So in older Christian practices, the priest would face the altar and read in Latin to an incomprehensible language to most of his audience, his male celibate priest only, right? And now we actually take the gospel out into the church, into the people. This is for you. This is not some guy standing back here. You can come back, Tracy. This is not some guy standing back here. This is Tracy reading to us. People died to make that happen. People died to make it possible for the book to be ours, to be with the people, translated into our language. People also died to allow people like Tracy to read out loud in the congregation. It's a holy moment of saying, you are holy and you deserve to hear this. You are given the Word of God as a present symbol. It's not something in a back room. It's not some priest standing back there. It's actually read aloud. And then, so that you can really hear it, at the moment that Christ speaks during the communion table, there are some sounds. So those bells go off, and you might wonder, why are there bells at these two? Those bells go off as a symbol, again, a symbol, a present reality, to tell you what the red letter words are, what Jesus said. And that's, again, a bodily experience. This is not just like on the page, oh, Jesus said this. No, it's giving you a sensory experience, a symbol of God's love, of saying Christ came to you to say these things. And as we read at the table, as we read the gospel, we read in this kind of cycle, right? We go through it. It's called a liturgical church because we keep reading in this cycle, and that's part of the liturgical dance. We're dancing together through these passages. So, a couple last things. Nicene Creed. We're going to say that after I finish talking. Then we're going to say the Nicene Creed. And again, the Nicene Creed is one of those ancient Christian practices that was compiled years before the Bible was fully formalized. So that's a Christian thing. The Bible, there's still arguments about what's in it. But the Nicene Creed has been there for centuries, for thousands of years. And for me, I ended up following these key parts of Christianity because I found that those symbols communicating God's love to me more than my kind of heady intellectual understanding, because I have doubt. And I think doubt is coupled with faith. I think those are two legs to the same body. And I think it's somewhat intellectually dishonest if somebody never acknowledges they have doubt. Because we live in a world full of mystery and full of science. So being able to share your lived real experience, I think, is part of what we bring here to the Episcopal Church. And finally, we come to the passing of the peace together as a congregation later in this service. And that passing of the peace is also, again, a bodily experience. We're showing up for each other. We're showing up for each other in a way that turns us into living symbols of God's love for each other. So just as Christ was transfigured on that mountain and demonstrated to his disciples that he was there from God, you're also saying to each other, I'm here from God. I'm offering you peace. So St. Teresa of Avila said that in this world today, Christ has no hands but yours, has no feet but yours, has no voice but yours. You today are also a symbol of God's love in the world. Thanks be to God.